This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
Presented by GSMC Podcast Network. My name is Chris Blades, and before I get started here today, I want to make sure I remind you guys, as always, if you haven't already, please subscribe to the podcast. Please make sure you never miss an episode. Please make sure you're always on top of when we drop our latest stuff. Also, if you could please as well, give us a 5-star rating, write us a nice review. Be very appreciated, very helpful. Allows you guys to like, what you guys dislike, the ways we can improve, all that stuff. And also, if you're on social media, we're on social media, so you can find us there, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. We can talk, we can chat, we can debate, we can discuss, and based on the tweets coming from different sports media on Friday, and even continuing into the rest of the weekend, the NBA players have a lot to discuss, and I did not think we would ever get to this point. And by that I mean, they have a lot to discuss in terms of whether they're even going to play the season. I mean, that sounds crazy to me because as we've been discussing sports coming back, if they're going to come back, when they're going to come back, all that stuff. But once the timeline was rolled out for the NBA and the return to play plan was rolled out and the different dates and everything, and like I said, when everything kind of got set up and then they went through their playoff format, all that stuff, I kind of figured, I was like, oh, okay, then they're just going to be back. Like, that is what it is. And I kind of didn't think much of it. Then next thing I know, they're having discussions, and I'm like, oh, this season may be in jeopardy. Now, I will preface this whole discussion by saying, I think the season's going to be played. Long story short, too much money to lose out on. But I'm just saying the fact that they're even at this point where they're entertaining these discussions, or people are entertaining these discussions, is a big step for, I don't want to say big step, is a big deal. Because, like I said, they in theory would have already had the discussions and everyone would just be on the same page. But I find it interesting that that is not actually true, and people seem to be a little bit more split on whether they should come back than I originally thought. Now, we will never know how split, because not every player has expressed, or was on this call. I think it was like 80, some odd players that on the call that Kyrie apparently was behind organizing on Friday, which was for some apparently for some players that felt as if their opinions originally were not as, I don't want to say as important, but were as involved in the decision making for if and how the league should come back. And now, even since the original conversation, there's been a lot of again, I don't want to call it social unrest, but a lot of protests and riots and different things behind the killing of George Floyd, behind the killing of Breonna Taylor, behind the killing of Ahmaud Arbery, and others since all these protests started. Because again, it didn't stop there, I should say, and it's not going to stop there. This is an issue that America has to fix. Probably never will, but I understand if you want to be hopeful, but I'm not. And then obviously this has been going on for since forever. So this isn't like a new problem America's facing, but it's just now a problem that everyone, I don't want to say everyone, but more people are now aware of. For whatever reason, it is what it is. I'm not going to judge somebody from being late to the party. I mean, I think it was Drake once said, better late than never, but never late is better, and that is true, because this is no different than what Kaepernick was talking about years ago, or what other people have been saying for years. But hey, if you're on board now, you're on board. That's better than, like I said, not being on board. So, there is that. But it seems as if, as I was saying, the players are split. And I am happy that the players are willing to speak up for what it is that they believe. If they believe, hey, look, now is not the time for us to, well, now is the time, I should say, for us to be a part of the change and a part of the progress as opposed to just being basketball players. And I commend that. I mean, you had a player, again, different league in the WNBA, Iman Moore, in the prime of her career being like, hey, I've done a lot as a basketball player. And again, she hasn't even made close to some of the money that even the average NBA player has made. Just because of the gender wage gap and everything. And there's reasons for that, but that's not the point. And she was like, hey, look, I'm going to quit. I think she was doing some missionary work, and she's been doing it for, I think, 2 seasons. And that. Well, she did it last season, and then I think she's going to continue to do it this season. So then I'm not going to say anybody's going to do that, but, and that's to see that when athletes feel like, hey, my purpose in life is bigger than just being on a basketball court, they are willing to do things about that. So, and I'm not going to say, I mean, some of the quotes that came out from Kyrie saying that he's willing to give it all up. I mean, we'll see if that is true. But yeah, I'm not expecting anyone to do that. I'm not expecting anyone to turn to Malcolm X or Fred Hampton or Martin Luther King, nothing like that. But for those of them that feel as if now is the time for them to do something as a collective unit, I can commend that. Because it's not an easy thing to do. It'd be easy just to come back and play and just like wear shirts and protest during the anthem or whatever, with the fist up. I don't think you're allowed to kneel in the NBA, which is funny for the league that is considered more progressive, and it is compared to the NFL at least, and MLB just because the players have more power, but a lot of the institution itself and the power structure itself and the way in which the commissioners handle things is not that much different, obviously. Adam Silver does have the check on his side for the Donald Sterling stuff. But outside of that, the way him and Goodell handle things is not as different as you would think, which is not something that's often discussed. But again, they're definitely more progressive than the NFL, though. Like I said, you don't really get a lot of credit for that, but that is true. So I'm saying you could do like protest during the anthems or speak out about it after the game, stuff like that, and that would be all fun and good. But that's exactly what Colin Kaepernick did 4 years ago, and the message still got lost. It didn't matter how many times he spoke about it, didn't matter how many times he was asked about it, people still chose to take away from his message or what he was doing, what they wanted to take away from. Even though he said multiple times, I'm not protesting the anthem, I'm not protesting the military, I'm not disrespecting them. I'm just, again, protesting the police brutality and systematic oppression of black and brown people in this country. And obviously that was the time to do it, to bring awareness to the issue. People still chose to, like I said, you had the president and all his supporters and different things, people, or again, even people within the league back then saying about how it was an anthem protest. Even when people refer to it now, they still call it an anthem protest, even though it wasn't an anthem. It wasn't a protest of the anthem. It was a protest that took place during the anthem. But if it's not like he was saying like we need this song change, which he could very well say, because if you dig into the history of the Star Spangled Banner, very problematic. But it's not like he was protesting the anthem itself and wanting it changed. He was protesting, like I said, America and what's the things that are wrong with America, and just it happened to take place during the anthem. But like I said, it didn't matter how many times he explained it, didn't matter how many times he said the reason for why he was kneeling. People still chose to take from it what it is and see what they wanted to see. And I guess some players, and if the players feel like that could happen here, even if they're saying the right things, doing the right things, people will still choose to just focus on the basketball or focus on something else. And then I can see why they're not as happy about the playing right now. And that doesn't even bring into I haven't even talked about it yet, the aspect of the pandemic that is still out here, people. I mean, from what I've been seeing on Twitter, because I haven't dug into all the numbers for every state, but a lot of what I've been seeing, Arizona seems to be the new hotspot. Again, that doesn't affect the NBA per se, but it just goes to show that like places around the country are still seeing increases in numbers, I should say, when you would think after months of staying at home, the number should be, not that they shouldn't be at zero, but they shouldn't be like spiking completely. Like you shouldn't be hitting new record highs for the number of positive tests every day, like Florida and Texas and Arizona, places like that are. And that's not what should be happening. You should still be having cases because, again, there's just too many people in this country to kind of control that. But it shouldn't be spiking at that sort of a level. Like, that's a problem. But that's where we're at. And like I said, they're heading down to a state in Florida that's one of the cases. Again, it's not as bad as Arizona is, but it's up there with Texas in terms of like how many cases they're seeing for every day come in new and new. And that's a problem. If I was a player, that'd be a problem for me. I would not want to be in a situation where even in that bubble that they try to keep it safe, it can almost kind of be an incubator for the disease if someone catches it. Because that's the things they were talking about. I think they're talking about testing even not just the players and coaches and staff, stuff like that, but also like the hotel workers every other day. That's great. But it's not a disease or a virus where if you test positive for it, if you test negative for it, that means you're good as long as you don't like put yourself in harm's way. Like you could test positive 2 days. You could test negative. And 2 days later test positive and not do anything wrong in between those 2 days. Like you could wear a mask, you could wear gloves, you could try to be safe, and you still might test positive 2 days later because it takes a while for it to pop up in your system, which is like one of the main issues with the disease. So I'm saying is that like even with you taking those precautions, it could take days and days and up to, like it says, up to between 2 and 14 days is the number that you've been hearing a lot. And I'm saying that's a long time between when you contracted and when you could pop up on a test. And I'm saying there's a lot that can happen between then, and since everyone will be kind of caged in using the same facilities, using the same hotels, using the same arena, using the same buses and transportation back and forth, there's a chance that if one person gets it, and it seems as if that's going to be the case, because I don't know how you keep it out, especially, again, when you're going to a state where the cases continue to rise. Somebody's going to get it, and potentially even quickly, because, as we'll talk about a little bit later, it's happening in college sports as they're starting to come back to campus now for their workouts. So I'm saying once that happens, there's a chance that it could quickly spread to a team or throughout the entire league. I don't think it's going to take everybody out, but it could quickly happen. And I know, and if I remember correctly, I thought I remember hearing one of the mothers of Dwight Howard's children had disease and passed from it, if I remember correctly. Correct me if I'm wrong, please. But if that is true, then I don't know. He's been speaking out about like the social stuff, but I'm saying from a coronavirus perspective, I could see why he'd also be against it in that regard. Like, why would I want to put myself in harm's way when I already know somebody that was involved and passed from it? You had Karl Anthony Towns' mother, the same thing happened to him. Obviously, he's not coming back because the Timberwolves didn't make the playoffs, but if you're worried about your own mother, it's a worry that I'd be like, hey, it might cause you some pause. So it's an interesting aspect on that side of things for the not return, but on the return side, there is a lot of money to be lost if they don't come back. I know Bobby Marks put out the tweet on Friday. He said the players have the right to do as they choose. However, the economics on not playing are devastating. $1.2 billion in lost player salary, 35% of total pay. The NBA now has leverage to tear up the CBA and negotiate a new one, and also $2 billion lost in revenue to the league. So, on top of just like the whole CBA stuff, there's a lot of money both the players and the league and the TV partners and everybody and Disney will stand to lose if there's no season. That's why I think there's going to be a season. But even when you had guys like Kyrie talking and him being like, hey, look, I know I've made real money compared to like other guys, and they're all making real money compared to like the average citizen, like myself. I would gladly take the vet minimum NBA salary right now. But I'm saying a lot of those guys can't afford to take a pay cut because, as we've discussed on this podcast and you've seen discussed with a lot of athletes when this whole thing was going on, a lot of them do live, surprisingly enough, paycheck to paycheck, just like your average citizen does. So they need as much money as they can. They can't really afford to take $1 billion loss as a collective group and then also then suffer the consequences of that for years to come with the new CBA. Because I think CBA is like 10 years, so it might be better year 3, 4, and 5, but their numbers, their salaries and stuff still might not be where they need to be at. And that's a situation that some players just can't afford to be in. And I get that too. Not everybody can afford that. Also, I know Austin Rivers, who had some things I agree with, some things I didn't, but one of the things he did mention that could very well work is that they can use the funds from playing to help give to those organizations and give to those programs and different things to try to reform and change the country in the way in which we want it to be changed. So that is a very fair point, because not that the players don't have the money to do that now, but some of that money that can then be used towards those things, as opposed to now, instead of going out of your own, I mean, you're still going out of your own pocket, but instead of now having to go back on what you've already had banked, saved up that you thought you were going to be able to spend on something else, now you got a good dip into that. And like I said, a lot of people can't afford that. So that is a fair point on that. So like I said, there's two sides of this, and neither side is necessarily wrong, and there's a middle ground to be had here. But I just will say and no one should be bashing the players in terms of like being entitled or just being like, hey, just go back and play. Like, you guys aren't social activists, blah, blah, blah. This is how they feel. And again, it's not just Kyrie, because that's what another thing I saw a lot of people were bashing Kyrie solely. You've seen Dwight Howard talk about it. You've seen Lou Will talk about it. Like, there are players that feel the same way Kyrie did. He was just like the first one to willingly put his name behind it. But there's also players that feel like Austin Rivers does, where they think like, hey, we can use our platform to help us create the change that we want. And the last thing before I move on to the next segment is the whole distraction thing. And sports as a whole has always been a distraction. I mean, it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's nice to get away from life, both good and whether it's good or bad, and for 3 hours and just focus on a game or just bring yourself some enjoyment. But as we mentioned with Kaepernick, it can allow the situation to be lost. And with the Kaepernick situation specifically, that was to bring awareness. We're past awareness now. Everyone that wants to be aware of the issues in this country is aware. Now's the time for change and for action. And if the players can't figure out a cohesive way to push forward that change and that action so that we progress instead of regress, then I understand why they're like, hey, maybe we should sit this one out. Again, ramifications of this are massive, and I'm not going to tell any athlete what to do because it's not my decision, but I could see why they feel like if we want to make the change, we need to be a part of it as opposed to just being on the back burner, just being like the money behind stuff. And like I said, that's not necessarily the right or wrong way to do it, but from their perspective, I get it. That's all I'm going to say. I do get it from that point. You want to be involved, you want to make sure you're on the right side of this, and if they think they are, that'll be better served from them being actively out there as opposed to playing, and more power to them. And that's another thing, that the main point of Kyrie's thing was just do something as a group, because I guess some players felt like their opinions weren't listened to originally, so now whatever they do as a collective unit, whether they decide to play, which I think they will, or decide not to play, just do it as a group, be all on the same page. So that's what'll be best. And also be on the same page on how we want to decide we want to protest or promote the issue throughout the season. Because, again, just coming back just to come back, while money-wise makes sense, but from a social aspect, you should be using this time period, if you're going to play, to continue the discussion. It shouldn't just die down once sports return. And I don't think it will, but I'm just saying, you want to just make sure everybody's on the same page with that. And speaking of people protesting and stuff like that, Jay-Z kind of caught some heat last year or 2 years ago, whenever it was, once he joined the NFL. Well, for that, but also for making the comment that, like, we're past kneeling now. And I was like, oh, like, what is he, like, that's a stupid thing to say. But then now when you see more, especially white athletes talking about, like, they're going to kneel during the season, I'm trying to think, maybe I understand what his point was. So we'll talk about that, and also like the aspect of players kneeling throughout the season, whether it's necessary or not, right after this break. So stay right there.
Are you looking for the very best NFL and college football podcast? Then check out the GSMC Football Podcast. Get the latest football news both on and off the field. From the NFL Draft to trades to the rumor mill to the NFL Combines. They got you covered. That's GSMCpodcast.com/football-podcast. Get updates on college rivalries, game day insights, and much, much more. It's football talk the way you want it. This show eats, sleeps, and breathes football. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
as I mentioned before the break, I guess it's not official if J.J. Watt is going to take a knee, but over the weekend, I think this was also on Friday. Yeah, I think this was Friday or Saturday. Someone tweeted or responded to a tweet from somebody saying that, like, I'm pretty sure J.J. Watt won't take a knee, or we won't see J.J. Watt take a knee, because obviously J.J. Watt's, like, he's, like, the Captain America of, like, the NFL to, like, people just, like, he's very, like, pro-America, this is great, kind of stuff. That's just how he portrays himself, or that's how he's come off, let's say. And also, I think he was kind of, had that stance, like, a few years ago, about the kneeling and stuff. But he responded to that tweet saying, A, don't speak for me, which means he could be out there kneeling, and B, and again, though he reiterated the point that if you still think it's about disrespecting the flag or a military, you clearly haven't been listening, which, again, people listen to what they want to hear. So, this person clearly hasn't been listening, but that's not the point. The point is that, like, J.J. Watt is open to the possibility of doing it. I know Bill O'Brien said that he'll take a knee with the team if that's what they choose to do or whatever. Because, again, they have the right to protest. I think James White came out and said he thinks some players will protest during the anthem, or they'll do something. Andrew Pearson already said he's taking a knee. Baker Mayfield responding to comments, I think it was on Instagram, said that he'd be taking a knee. Oh, absolutely kneel during the anthem. That's funny enough about the Texans thing. I know the players took a knee against the Seattle Seahawks in 2017, and then owner Bob McNair, who I believe has passed away, said in an owners meeting that we can't have the inmates running the prison in reference to player demonstrations and protests during the national anthem. So that's funny looking back on that now, because clearly that's what they're going to be doing. But again, he's not in power anymore, because, like I said, I'm pretty sure he's dead. So you don't have to worry about it. The inmates will now be able to do as they please. I still can't. I can't believe they didn't run him out of there. Run him out of there for that. It's not exactly Donald Sterling level, but like, I don't understand how you can just like say that stuff and just be like, yeah, no, you sold the team. Like, what? But whatever. Also, George Floyd was from Houston, so I mean, they'll probably have a little bit more connection to it. But yeah, so then my point was going to be like, how effective will a kneeling be now? And not going to judge anybody that wants to kneel. Obviously, every player has the right to protest in whichever way they choose to protest. If that's their best way of protesting, then by all means, do it. It's better than doing nothing to a degree. But I do feel like the kneeling feels a little too late. And by that I mean, if everybody was doing this back in 2016 or 2017 when Colin Kaepernick was doing it and it wasn't like socially acceptable to like protest police brutality, then it'd be a different story. Well, one, because people would have had more people, there would have been more people backing Kaepernick, and there would have been, like I said, he wouldn't have been blackballed, and also they could have been on the right side of this originally, because the NFL obviously was on the wrong side, and then now they're trying to become on the right side, but again, it's a little weird, because we know what happened just a few years ago. But again, better late than never. So there's that. And two, there's no pressure now. Like before, and I think it was Jordan Lucas, who I know it was with the Chiefs at the time. I don't know if he's still with the Chiefs. But I know it was with the Chiefs at the time. He said that he wanted to kneel during his rookie year, but he didn't feel like he could because he wasn't sure how the owners would look at it, and he was trying to get his job, blah, blah, blah. And he didn't want to like get cut and everything. And I know Ron Brooks, who used to play for the Eagles, he said that he believes he didn't get signed because he kneeled. Though, I mean, from the Eagles standpoint, that shouldn't have been an issue because the Eagles have multiple players out there that were very active in talking about the social injustice that happens to the black community at the hands of police and other institutions ingrained into this country. And also, like, Jeffrey Lurie is a pretty, I don't know, I want to say progressive but open-minded owner in terms of he will listen to his players. So, I don't know from a Eagles perspective, but maybe from around the league. That's possible, though. He did have a season cut short due to injury with the Eagles, so that may have been another issue. But, again, we'll never know. We really won't know, and that's what he believes. That's what he believes. I can't tell him that he's wrong, because he obviously lived that I didn't. So, there's that. But like I'm saying now, there was literally no danger in doing it. Like, I mean, other than I guess you're gonna get some ire from the president, or some fans are gonna be like, I'm not watching anymore, blah blah blah. Like, the NFL can afford it; they have so many fans, it really won't matter. And then plus you'll have some of those people that left once the whole Kaepernick situation, assuming they sign him back along to go along with this. Because I mean, letting people protest is great, but not signing Cap back, a different story. But yeah, so just letting like people that were off the NFL now come back to the NFL if they're allowing them to do this, and obviously Cap gets signed, so they were kind of all balanced out. Like we talked about, Nike did the math; it worked out for them. Like I said, especially now where it's like again socially acceptable, more or less, to protest in this manner, you're going to see less. You're going to get less backlash for it, and that's why I feel like the kneeling won't be as effective. I mean, I don't want to say it won't be as effective, but it doesn't feel as necessary now because a majority of the country agrees that this is a problem that needs to be fixed. That was the whole point of this, was from Kaepernick's perspective, was to raise awareness so that more people could realize that this is an issue in this country. And now I feel like people understand that now. Now that they don't need to be reminded of it, because obviously it'll allow people to continue the discussion. But at this point, like, what does kneeling do? And like, I'm not going to say it in a bad way, because I'm not going to be like, oh, why are you kneeling? It's like, if you want to kneel, by all means. I'm not going to be mad. I'm not going to judge any of that stuff. But from the NFL player perspective, why now? That'll just be my only question, is why now? If you weren't about it before, why now? Like, why? Because again, if you guys had all jumped on this bandwagon before, because the message, no different than it was 4 years ago, 3 years ago, however long. No, completely the exact same message. We're fighting for the same things. Everything that was messed up with our country then is just as messed up, if not more, now. Like, but why now? Like, what now? And if you're going to say, oh, it's acceptable, oh, you were afraid for your job. Again, if the players had backed Kaepernick the way that they're seemingly backing him now, because again, he's not in the league, so not necessarily backing him, but the way that they're speaking out about it now, it wouldn't have been a problem. They couldn't have fired everybody. I promise you. Now, I'm not going to judge like the Baker Mayfields and the Mahomeses and some of those other guys, because they were young. And they, like, I mean, when young, not even just young, they weren't in the league. Saquon, like, those guys weren't in the league yet, so, I mean, you can't judge them, but, like, for, like, a Zeke, he's a top 4 pick. And again, Jerry Jones was very adamant about towing the line, though he did that foolish thing where he, like, kneeled before the anthem, then had him stand up during. Like, that wasn't the point. The point was to kneel during the anthem, but whatever. But yeah, Jerry was all about towing the line, everyone's going to stand for the anthem, blah, blah, blah. But I do find it interesting, like somebody like him, and again, not blaming him, not his fault, but you find out when people feel like they have the power to speak out and do things. Because now, he has a big new contract. He's getting paid, like his money's guaranteed, like he's good. Back then, he's on his rookie deal, he's still trying to get paid, trying to still be in Jerry's good graces. So it's a little different. The same thing with Dak. Dak said 4 years ago that he, like, doesn't understand kneeling, he'll never do it, he'll never just protect the flag, he was all on that side of stuff, and now, again, he still donated to the police, which was a separate issue, but he seems to have come around at least a little bit. Same thing, like Drew Brees, a lot of those guys now understand what Kaepernick was talking about, which, I mean, the message was clear then, but whatever, and now he seems to be willing to do this, and I'm just like, why now? Like, what is so different now? And obviously, I know the difference, but I would love to hear them say, like, what is the difference now? Because had they all stood firm on this back then, because the issues were exactly the same, they wouldn't have had this issue for 3 or 4 years. They could have told the owners, or they could have forced the owner's hand, just like they did in this case, because now all of a sudden the owners are going to got to do a 180 on the issue, because you got Mahomes in there talking about Black Lives Matter. Change the dynamics of things when the star of your sport is now on a certain side of an issue. Now you have to be on that side of the issue. The same way the NBA has been with, like, LeBron and Steph and all those guys speaking out about different things. When they speak out, you have to back them. Or if they don't speak out, as they didn't, not everybody did with the Hong Kong situation, then you just, like, let it go into the air. You don't make any statements. I mean, and then I guess other than bashing Daryl Morey for speaking out, so there's that. But yeah, so just like the awareness now that that Kaepernick was trying to bring is, as we mentioned last time, people are aware. Everybody that wants to be aware is now aware. So what is next? Because kneeling to bring awareness, no, that we're like into, like I said, to quote Jay-Z, we are past that now. We are past the awareness stage. Now we are in the action and the change stage. And what will these players be doing once the season starts to help institute that change? Now, a big step would be getting at least the people to listen to you. If the NBA and the NFL stood hand in hand and both were not playing, not gonna happen. I'm just saying a hypothetical situation. Now, if they both were like that and they everybody losing billions of dollars, that'll cause some of the big wigs potentially to listen to your side. Now, again, in the NFL, they're still listening, and not to say they're not listening in the NBA, but they'll really listen once they start losing the money. Now that you got to hit people in the pockets where it hurts, and that'll definitely do that. But yeah, so just what's the next thing these players are going to do? Because again, it's easy to kneel now, and I'm not going to, like I said, get mad at anybody or shun anybody for doing it. But back when it was a difficult decision to kneel and you can lose your livelihood, not that many people were willing to stand with Cap and do it. But now that it's socially acceptable and everybody's like, oh yeah, you're right, we should kneel. And now everybody's kneeling, and it's just like this, the optics of it just look funny to me. Now maybe it might not look the same way to everybody, but to me it looks funny because I'm like, all right, now once you're like, oh, I'm not gonna lose my job if I do this. All right, cool, yeah, no, I'll kneel. That ain't no problem. Like I said, a couple years ago, when it was like, oh, your livelihood could be on the line, everyone was like, I don't know. Outside like the Eric Reeds, Kenny Stills, a couple other guys where they were willing to kneel and do their thing. And I mean, most of them are still in the league. Really just Kaepernick's the one that's been blackballed, other than, like I said, the Ron Brooks situation that he brought up. But the majority of them were able to continue playing in the league even while kneeling. So it showed that not everybody got shunned. Obviously, Kaepernick was the face, so that's why it happened to him. But the rest of the people that were kind of in the background, if you will, were able to do it and keep getting paid. So it's just an interesting choice and decision that these players seem to be making now. When you fight, and I'm not saying because a lot of these people have done stuff outside of kneeling to help create change. So I'm not trying to badmouth them in that regard, but from the kneeling, strictly kneeling perspective, it is funny that once it's comfortable, now everybody wants to do it. Or once it's accepted, I should say, now everybody wants to do it. But when it was a tough decision to make, when you, like I said, the decision, the message, everything's still the same. The awareness they're trying to bring is still the same. Just because everyone publicly has flipped on it, now everybody wants to be out there kneeling. Not going to blame the young guys because they weren't in the league yet, stuff like that. But when we're talking about like some of these older players that were in the league and were established, talking about they're going to kneel now, I'm like, okay, that seems a little funny. To me, at least. So, while I'm happy the players will be kneeling and protesting, doing all that stuff, make sure that, and people have been out there protesting, they've been doing things, so I'm not going to say they're not doing anything, but make sure you continue to do things. Because this is not, like I said, this isn't going to be fixed in July, it's not going to be fixed in September, it's not going to be fixed next year. This is a long process to get stuff changed and get stuff reformed and potentially abolished or defunded or however you feel about it. I mean, I'm very much a defund / disband / abolish the police situation. Like break it down and start it up from scratch, kind of thing, like they did in Camden, like they're talking about doing in Camden, New Jersey, that is, and talking about doing in Minneapolis. That's what I think worked, because the reform sounds great, but the House is trying to pass a bill and the Senate's like, yeah, no, if qualified immunity's in there, we're not going for it, which is like one of the big issues with the way police are held accountable, is that basically if they're like, they fear for their life or was within the line of duty, hey, not much I can do. So that's like, if that's a big breaking point, then we're not getting anywhere. Because that should be one of the first things to at least be adjusted. I'm not, because if you don't want to, I mean, you should take it out completely. But if you're not going to take it out completely, at least adjust it. But it seems like they don't even want to adjust it, and that's part of the problem. So that's a completely separate argument. But my point was that make sure that we continue the fight, because it can't end. It can't end. It's not ending today, because we're still continuing to see these issues pop up last week or continue the week before. They'll happen again this week or the next month. Not going to be the last instance of this. So we need to make sure we keep applying pressure, keep making people aware, keep trying to hold people accountable, because it'll be a little while before these police officers in the George Floyd case are held accountable. I mean, the Breonna Taylor's murderers still haven't even been arrested yet, so there is that. But yeah, just keep holding your legislators accountable, keep holding your mayors, your senators, House of Representatives, your representatives, your governors, your district attorneys, your attorney generals, all those people. Hold them accountable for what you believe that they should be doing. Because if they're not, then that's why you have the power to vote and vote them out, and also you put people in power that will make those changes that you want to see. And also we'll try to make sure your votes aren't suppressed like they were in Georgia. So there's that. But yeah, so after we come back, we're going to discuss why the MLB can't seem to get this right. I mean, there's going to be a season. The commissioner said there's going to be a season. The players are saying there's going to be a season. But here we are in mid-June. Still no season. There's still no return to play plan agreed upon. And I'm just going to talk about how we got here and kind of what's the next steps for everybody, because this is a complete mess. But we'll discuss that right after the break. So stay right there.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA. From the UFC to extreme cage fighting, they got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
GSMC Sports Podcast, presented by GSMC Podcast Network. So, the sport that many thought would be the first to return still has no set date on when they're going to return, how many games they're going to play, how the playoffs are going to work, none of that stuff. And that sport, obviously, is the MLB. And now the MLB has been a mess with these discussions since the beginning. They had the meeting in March about the prorated salaries and stuff that apparently had a handshake agreement on. But then that was contingent on them playing like all the games, or no, it was contingent on them playing with fans, supposedly, is what the owners were saying. But then, I don't know how you thought in March that we were going to be in a situation where fans would be allowed back in sports. That seems like a foolish thing to expect. From the owner's standpoint, to be like, yeah, no, I'm going to give you this money, but only if you have the fan revenue. But I'm like, why in March were you thinking that you were ever going to be able to have fans at a full capacity, at least? I mean, some stadiums are probably going to try to give 25% or whatever the number is to get some fans in if they can. But why you would think that you have a full? I mean, that's part of the owner's mistake. So and since then, they haven't really been able to have. They've had negotiations, but they haven't. Nothing's been worked out just because both sides are just come so far apart on this. The players want the full prorated. The owners want... take that back. Both sides want as much of their money as they can get. The players, with their side, is the full prorated salaries. The owners, from their side, is just how much ever they can get, and that, obviously, if that means less games or a lower percentage for the players on their prorated salaries, stuff like that, they'll do whatever as long as it gets them more money. And that's the unfortunate part of where we're at with these negotiations, that there's no real good faith or trust between the two sides. It's all about money, which, I mean, there's a lot of, that's what runs this country, so not surprising. But in that aspect is that because of that, and them being worried about money in two different ways, or I guess like from two different angles, they're not going to be able to agree, because the more money the players get, that's the more money the owners lose, and vice versa. The more money the owners withhold from the players to make themselves more money. Obviously, if the money's being withheld, then that's less money, I should say, the players get. So it's all bad. Everyone's like, they can't even like come with a decent in between agreement. Like, it's all a mess. And now the MLB players have rejected the latest offer from the owners and just asked the league to set the 2020 schedule, which basically, I guess, they can enact like as we talked about, the 50 game or how many ever games, 48 games for the season that like that the commissioner can just implement. The players are basically just like, hey, look, we did what we could. The owners are being greedy. And, I mean, the players are going to side with whoever they side with. I'm always on the players' side when it comes to these kind of negotiations, because the owners have more money, so they can afford to take more of a hit than the players, obviously, who need that money. Obviously, as much as these teams are worth, that's not as much money as the owners have, but if to own a team, you have to have in the hundreds of millions of dollars, you would think, unless you're just taking out big-time loans or getting a lot of help, which is a completely separate point. And I know the one owner, I think it was the Cardinals, said that the major teams aren't even like that profitable year to year or whatever, which may very well be true. But if that's the case, you're making money somehow. So if it's not through the baseball team, it's through whatever other business endeavors you have. So it's not like this is your only source of income. As for the players, literally all they have is playing in the majors. Obviously, some minor leaguers might have separate jobs or whatever. But even then, like most major league players, or not most, major league players don't have other jobs that they do. Obviously, they got like endorsements and stuff, but it's not like they have all these other sources of income that the owners potentially could have. I'm not saying everyone does. I don't know everyone's financial situations. I don't know their tax returns, all that stuff. But in theory, the owners should have more money, which means that they could take a little bit of a bigger cut from their money for this year and potentially next year, stuff like that. But it's only going to be a precursor to what will probably happen whenever the CBA runs out, which I don't know if it's after next season or before the start of next season. Whatever happens, there's going to be a strike. It's going to be a mess. Because if they can't even negotiate on this, how can you expect them to negotiate on a CBA? It's going to be a mess, like I said. But as I was saying, the MLB Players Association asked the MLB to set a schedule for the 2020 season rather than counter the latest return to play proposal by the league, setting the stage for MLB to implement a significantly shortened season or significantly shortened schedule and deepening the labor strife between the parties. In a statement Saturday night, MLBPA Executive Director Tony Clark rejected MLB's latest proposal and said further dialogue with the league would be futile. It's time to get back to work. Tell us when and where. A March agreement between the parties allows the MLB to set a schedule, and the league has suggested that in the absence of a negotiated agreement with the union, it could impose a schedule of somewhere in the neighborhood of 50 games and pay players full prorated salaries worth a total of around $1.5 billion. But again, full prorate for 50 games, I guess what that's like. I look at best, that's like half. No, for 50 games, that's what, a third? And then I'm not even sure how the prorate. We've discussed this, but I'm pretty sure full prorate, that means that's just like a third of their money. Absurd. If I did the math right on that. Please correct me if I'm wrong. MLBPA lead negotiator Bruce Meyer, in a letter sent to Deputy Commissioner Dan Halem on Saturday night obtained by ESPN, said, "We demand that you inform us of your plans by close of business on Monday, June 15th, so we could have that information soon." In a statement on Saturday night, MLB said in part, "We are disappointed that the MLBPA has chosen not to negotiate in good faith over the resumption of play after MLB has made three successive proposals that would provide players, clubs, and our fans with an amicable resolution to a very difficult situation caused by the COVID-19 pandemic." I mean, I don't know about providing the players, because again, they're trying to gyp them on more money. So that's looking a little funny in the light to your boy. But hey, maybe it's just me. Upon the implementation of a schedule, players wouldn't necessarily report to a second spring training immediately. Sources told ESPN parties still do not have an agreement on a healthy and safe a health and safety protocol and would need one before players arrive. Any season would be scheduled to start after 3 weeks spring training, though a coronavirus outbreak could change the league's plans. Multiple players on 40-man rosters have tested positive for the virus recently, according to sources. So, and also Rob Manfred, like I said, he says they're going to be baseball this year. 100% that's not going to be an issue. But yeah, I know Tim Kirchin has a couple articles about this, what the league is going through, talking about how, what was it? MLB has missed, like, kind of just like they haven't. This was a time to show people, hey, we're not just about the money. And they're clearly not doing that, which is a problem. Because then it just shows the greed and everything with this. And I also mentioned, I know there's a short video on ESPN, or at least I'm looking through the app. He says that talks between MLB and the MLBPA are a mess and weighs in on how a World Series champion could be viewed in a shortened season. As we discussed on, I forget if it was the last podcast or 2 podcasts ago. It was I guess it was 2 podcasts ago. Yeah, 2 podcasts ago. We're talking about like the MLB awards and stuff. Like, how do you have an MVP or a Cy Young for a 50-game season? It's literally a third of the games that you normally play. Like, you can't. Like, you literally can't. It won't be taken seriously. Same thing with the World Series champion. Same thing, like I said, with the NBA. They're going through the same situation. All the sports are. Where it's like, how can you have any sort of, like, I don't want to say respect, because for NBA, at least they made it through the majority of their season before the stuff happened. But for the MLB, like, they didn't even start, and now you're going through this weird shortened season. Like, how can you have any respect for it? But yeah, it's all just a mess, and it really didn't have to be this way. The league and the players could have figured something out. I don't know what, but they could have figured something out to get it to, like, they had a nice plan in place and everybody was going to be happy. But again, this is what happens when money's involved. Both sides don't necessarily agree on how much money each side should get, and then you stuck here where you now have to force the commissioner to put together a shortened 50-game season. When, like I said, people thought this was going to be the first sport back. They had a chance to be the first sport back. I mean, NBA is not starting until the end of July. They could have been back by start of July if they just were willing to work together and figure something out. But both sides, to a degree, like I said, I'm more on the player side because them agreeing to something and then the owner trying to continue to cut their money, which they're already cutting, it just so that they can save some money is, again, how the rich stay rich, but also just that's not a reasonable negotiating tactic. If I'm on the MLB player side, like, I'm like, whoa, hold on, we agreed to this, and now you're trying to cut even more money when I'm already losing money. Again, both sides are losing money, but we agreed that if, in the case that we lose money, boom, this is what we're going to do. And now you're like, alright, so cool, we said that, but, like, what if you took another pay cut, though? Like, hey, up to you, but, like, hey, I think you take another pay cut. And if you were at your job, you'd be like, you would fight it. I'm not saying you'd outrightly say no, but I know most people would fight it. They'd be like, I don't want to take another pay cut after we already agreed to me taking a pay cut originally. Like, why would I have to take 2 pay cuts? That doesn't make any sense. But yeah, MLB's a mess. Negotiations have been a mess. They're, like, at no point did I ever think they were really going to... I thought there was a chance they could get close, but clearly I was mistaken. And like I said, it's just going to be a precursor to whatever happens when the CBA's up. It's going to be... I mean, not that the MLB hasn't had a strike before. Like, this is not new territory for them, but it's a shame that this is probably what's going to come. Because if they can't agree to this now, I can't expect them to agree to a whole CBA. And, I mean, they still don't even have health and safety protocol in place yet. The MLB has really dropped the ball on all of this. But I know, like I said, Tim Kirchin on ESPN, like through the app or like the website, or has a couple articles about this. I would recommend reading them if you're, like I said, if you're a baseball fan, to trying to understand how you got to this point with your sport. Not everyone's that interested, but if you are, or you just like reading about it from a good writer or analyst, Tim Kirchin is one of the best in the biz, so I would recommend. But yeah, just a shame that we got to this point. And speaking of strikes and stuff, it was a new 30 for 30 that came on Sunday night, Long Gone Summer, on the 1998 home run race. Obviously, that came post MLB strike in '94 and kind of helped raise the popularity. But as was mentioned, came with some costs and some issues. So I'll just give my opinions on the doc, what they talked about, how they paid certain people more favorably than you would have originally thought. But hey, it is what it is from that perspective. So we'll discuss all that right after the break. Stay right there.
Are you looking for help for your fantasy football team? Check out the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. Get today's best advice on who to start, who to sit, even who you should draft. From sleeper picks to red hot lineups, they got it all covered for you. That's GSMCpodcast.com/fantasy-football-podcast. We'll cover traditional leagues, dynasty, PPR, even IDP leagues. When you need fantasy help, there's just one show to hit up. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
And we are back here again on GSMC Sports Podcast, presented by GSMC Podcast Network. So, long gone summer. The story of the 1998 MLB season. Which, I mean, in all honesty, if you watch the documentary, you'll see, and if you didn't, again, skip to the next segment. But if you did, then you kind of already know that to a degree, and I know this is what I was watching, but I didn't make a big deal of it, but then someone kind of pointed out on Twitter, and I was like, yeah, no, you're probably right. And this did sort of feel like a documentary about Mark McGwire with Sammy Sosa sprinkled in. Not that he wasn't in it, not that they didn't talk about him, but I feel like there were times where he just went a while without Sammy Sosa being involved in it. And I mean, that is what it is. And he was obviously the one that did end up winning the home run race, so it makes sense to highlight the winner as well as second place. But seeing as it was kind of billed as the summer, you really didn't even we really didn't even start talking about Sammy until the June where he hit the 20 home runs. And I guess that's fair because he wasn't in the home run race before. It was between Griffey and Mark McGwire, and obviously to everybody, Sammy Sosa kind of exploded on the scene in that regard because he was never, not that he wasn't considered a home run hitter per se, but that was obviously not his game because going into that season, he had never had a season with more than 40 home runs. I guess the year before he had 36. Obviously coming back in that 66, that's a really big difference. And you can see why the steroids kicked in. But yeah, it's just alright, so I understand from his perspective why he didn't have the notoriety, but just again from the documentary's perspective, it did kind of feel like a documentary about Mark McGwire. And then even in that regard, it kind of felt like a documentary trying to portray, to try to portray him in a good light, which was funny when you think about the Lance Armstrong doc in comparison. Granted, most people like Mark McGwire, most people hate Lance Armstrong, so that's funny, the contrast. But even if you watch the whole doc, it has an hour and 40 minutes just on the baseball, and then the last 10 to 15 are about the steroid stuff. And I feel like you could have found a better way to intermingle the two, because obviously that was the big fallout from that season and subsequent seasons, and that time period in general from baseball was just how rampant the steroid use was. I mean, even they tried to throw some shots. I think they tried to throw one shot at Barry Bonds in there too, which was foolish, because as I've discussed, I think he's the best player of all time. He would have been in the Hall of Fame before 'Cause, I mean, he doesn't start using. So say, because I think the 1998 race is what got him to start like doing the performance enhancing drug stuff. Because he saw like McGwire and Sammy Sosa like hit all these home runs, and he's like, "Whoa, hold on." I mean, at least with McGwire, like he had hit 50 multiple times. He hit 58 the year before, so it wasn't like that shocking that like he could break the record. But again, hit 70. That's a big difference. And for Sammy Sosa, it was like to go from what was it? To go from 36, I think, in his last year to 66. All right, yeah, 30 home runs. That, I mean, come on, that's a big jump. That's a shame about McGwire too, because like at least with Sammy, like most of his All-Stars and stuff like that came when the PEDs came. But McGwire had like a good career up until that point. Again, he wasn't a home run champion. He was an All-Star 6 times with the A's. Well, actually 8 times. Excuse me. He was an All-Star 8 times with the A's. I guess maybe 9, depending on, I don't know because when he got traded, I don't know when he got traded. So I don't. No, I guess he got traded. Like he played over 100 games at Oakland. So 9 times with the A's, though 90-70. I don't know when he officially started using. But like had been about All-Star a bunch of times. Had won a World Series, won Rookie of the Year. Had the MLB record for rookie home runs. Like it's not like he didn't have awards and stuff before then. He won a Gold Glove, won 2 Silver Sluggers before '98. So it's like he didn't have awards. He was borderline Hall of Famer before then, but obviously that would have potentially put him in. But then the whole steroids thing. So I didn't like my main point was I didn't like how they tried to like hint at Barry Bonds when, as we discussed, Barry Bonds was a Hall of Famer from before he even started potentially using, which would have been, I guess, I'm trying to think. Well, I'll look it up real quick. That wasn't the main point of my argument here. But, okay, so say he starts using sometime after 98. So not 99. So say he starts using like 2001. I mean, that's when he put together the 73 home run season. So before then, before 2001, he is a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9-time All-Star from his years in Pittsburgh and the early years in San Francisco. He's hit over 40 home runs, 1, 2, 3, 4 times. Had a bunch of RBIs, had 50 stolen base season, a 40 stolen base season, a couple 40s, a couple 30s. Has great walk numbers. Hitting for good average, hitting like 300 almost every year. Let's see. Also, some of the other awards. He had won MVP 1, 2, 3 times already before the 2001 year, and also he won some more after that. Had won 8 Gold Gloves. Had won 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 Silver Sluggers before 2000. So again, his Hall of Fame career was already in place before the PEDs came up. So that was foolish. But as a whole, for the documentary, because again, it was just about the home run race and how it was coming to season, people were wondering if McGwire could do it, if he could even do it, because he had hit, like I said, the 58 the year before. So it was like, oh, okay, he's almost close to on 60. It's going to be between him and Griffey. It was between him and Griffey early on. And then, like I said, the 20 home runs in June. Crazy. Steroids and no steroids. That's crazy numbers. The crazy amount of homers hit in a month. And then he kind of catapulted himself into the race, and then Griffey ended up falling off. So it ended up with like 56, I think, home runs that year. But, again, when you have people hitting 70 and 66, it's the different, completely different stratosphere. And just that entire race helped re-energize the game of baseball. I mean, that time period as a whole, but that race specifically helped re-energize the game of baseball. It seems like, because again, I was, 2 or 3 at the time, so I wasn't aware of what's going on. But I was watching with my father, and he was kind of reminiscing on like that time, and even just people that were alive at that time just remembers that's one of the most exciting years of baseball in my lifetime, easily. 2001 with the Barry Bonds, probably the only other year that like remotely comes close to like, not that you can't have good years with good teams and good performance and stuff like that, but just where it was like baseball was like had become like must see TV. Like everyone was checking SportsCenter, everyone was checking ESPN to see, oh, did they hit a home run today? Did they hit a home run today? I mean, even during like their own games, like they would have the counter up in the outfield, and if somebody hit a home run, it would raise up. Like, I mean, once kind of McGuire, after he hit 62, he kind of like hadn't hit that many home runs between then and the last couple games of the season. He saw Sammy Sosa catch him and pass, and then like he hit a home run. I think he had like 5 home runs the last 3 days, something like that. The last 3 games, I should say. And just that back and forth captivated the country, almost you could say, to a degree, and then helped raise the profile of baseball. And then everyone turned their back on those guys, which wasn't the main point of the doc, but it's just one of my takeaways. It was just like, it's crazy how much everyone benefited from that era of baseball, even to this day. Again, obviously, not as popular, but the sport was, you could argue, on life support following the strike. They needed something to kind of re-energize it, to get everybody back in it. And then that steroid era came, and you could kind of understand why Bud Selig was like, alright, this may be going on, but like we're making a lot of money and people are interested in the game finally, so we're not really gonna institute any rules to make it illegal. Because obviously once it became illegal, then people were tested positive for it and it became a whole big deal. But at the time, there were no rules, there were no regulations, as they said. The owners and the Player Association hadn't regulated anything to be like, oh, this is, I mean, people knew it was wrong, but like, it was like, it's not illegal. And it was like, if you can find ways to improve yourself legally, why wouldn't you? And again, I know it's wrong, so that's probably why you wouldn't. But for most people, it's like, and from Mark McGuire's perspective, it was just like, he was just a guy, and I don't think they really delved into why Sammy Sosa did it. But from his perspective, he was just trying to get through the injuries. He'd been injured a lot throughout his career up until that point, so he was just trying to do something that could help him maintain his level of play through the injuries. And this was supposedly going to help the andro and some of the other things that he took. And it did, obviously. Helped him with 70 home runs. So it's not like it did nothing for him. But then that's always been my issue with steroids, is that like, even if, alright, you can stay healthier, or you're bigger or stronger, or you recover quicker from injury, stuff like that, baseball is still a very hard sport, even if you're cheating. Unless, like I said, unless you know what pitch is coming. Like, the actual situation, that's different. But just being stronger or recover better from injury, stuff like that doesn't take away from the person on the mound is still trying to throw you, is still throwing a ball 90 plus miles per hour sometimes, and even when it's in the 80s, it's curving all ways that things shouldn't move in the air. And I mean, some of those home run clips they were showing was like, some of those balls were left down the middle. So it is what it is. But some of these were like, they were good pitches. I mean, I guess I kind of understand with the strength thing, because like they were hitting balls like the triple deck, and it was like the upper deck, and I'm like, whoa, hold on, humans shouldn't be able to hit a ball that far, but they were. So I understand why they were mad. But even like, for if it's one of those things where like during that time you don't know who was and who wasn't using it. Obviously, they had talked about the New York Times article that came out where they had like the 106 players on it, all that had tested positive anonymously for it. They named some of the players like Sammy Sosa, A-Rod, and McGuire, I think was in there. Some of the other people. And that's fine in front of Congress. I forgot that Sammy Sosa used that translator up there. That was a terrible look. I don't know why he did that. Especially when everyone else was admitting, and McGuire admitted it, some other guys admitted it. It was like, just admit it, dude. Like, it's not that serious. But yeah, this is like one of those things where like, if you can't say who was and who wasn't using it, how can you shun the guys that quote unquote got caught? If everybody was doing it. And especially if they didn't like, now if you want to shun like the Sosas of the world, the people that like lied about it, like under oath and stuff, alright, I can kind of get it. Because I'm just like, alright, come on, bro. Like, we know you did it, just like say you did it. And I guess other than that article, they don't know he did anything. Other than, well, until he admitted it. But they didn't know. All they had was the one article. Like, there was no failed drug test, nothing else. It was just that one New York Times thing. And still, I'm just like, steroids, obviously bad, but great for the sport. And I don't understand why people can't understand that. They always try to like shun that era, and like all their records are are futile and there's asterisks, they don't count. Like Roger Maris still the home run leader, blah blah blah. Even though during the time they didn't even let him. I think there was a movie about him and talking about like how the sports rise and everyone was against him breaking the record, which is like crazy. It's just like, hey, whoever breaks it. It is what it is. But they were like, they wanted like Babe Ruth or Mickey Mantle or DiMaggio, whoever. I forget who was on the Yankees during his time, but whoever it was, I think it was Mantle. They were like, hey, they wanted him to break the record and not Roger Maris. And I think that the people were talking about the movie. They were like, I think he went to his grave, like not even knowing that he officially had the record, which is crazy to me. I'm just like, how does the media not let him know that? Like that seems so wrong. But here's what it is. So I'm saying that's who your home run kings, the person who back in the day people didn't even want to give credit for it, but now just because people did things that again weren't illegal at the time, are frowned upon now, but weren't illegal at the time. It's like being mad at someone for like smoking like cigarettes like 40 years ago. Again, did you know it was wrong? Probably. Was it like widely accepted as wrong? No. So like, how can you be mad at them for doing it during that time or getting addicted to it during that time, kind of thing? And that may not be the greatest analogy, but you get my point. It's just like people were doing things that weren't deemed illegal at the time, so I can be mad at them for doing things that they thought were just going to help them have a better career. Again, if it's not like they weren't facing pitchers that were doing it, again, you don't know who did and who didn't do it. But that was just my main takeaway, is that the sport greatly needed that season, and yet they've shunned the guys that kind of helped provide this sport. McGuire has been inducted into the St. Louis the Cardinals Hall of Fame, and has been around baseball since then. But Sammy Sosa, I think they said, hasn't been back to Chicago in over like 10 years or whatever. They just like completely like forget he ever existed from the franchise. And I'm like, up until the World Series team, like he was probably the most synonymous Cubs player, or most synonymous to the Cubs in my lifetime. He's one of the biggest. These guys were everywhere that summer, on national TVs, doing commercials, doing this, doing that, photo shoots, blah blah blah. Like they were literally the biggest stars in the sport. Some of the biggest stars in all the sports, and they're just gonna act like, oh no, that never happened. Everyone was okay with it then, when it was bringing in money and eyes and viewers for the league. But now all of a sudden, now that it's frowned upon, you're like, oh no. It's like it's very out of self-righteousness, in my opinion. It just doesn't seem right. Everybody capitalized on it then, got careers got started, people were able to do great things because of it. But now those guys are like, no, like they're so bad, I'm like, come on. Baseball has never been more exciting than it was, from what I've heard and from what I saw during that season, and then obviously the 2001 season with Barry Bonds. And the 98 was definitely all steroids, and Barry Bonds was probably steroids, but we don't know. But probably steroids. But I'm saying, that's when the peak of your sport was, when everybody was cheating, then there's something wrong with your sport. If the best time in my lifetime of the sport is a steroid era, then what does that say about the sport when you take steroids away and now no one cares? Now, I don't want to say no one cares, that's not right, but like less people care. That was one of the most captivating sports stories in my lifetime that summer. And then now everyone's just like, baseball, come back, don't come back, it is what it is. Football, on the other hand, like football didn't come back, then people would be out in the streets. Baseball don't come back, And on top of the fact, they showed me that Bud Selig knew how to market his players when he wanted to. Because, they have them out everywhere. There are a lot of people now that could pass Mike Trout on the street and wouldn't even know it was him. There's no way you could pass Mark McGwire or Sammy Sosa during 98 and didn't know who they were. And Mike Trout is 10 times a better player than both of them. Won multiple MVPs, everything. We're going to go down as one of the greatest of all time if he continues on this track. And yet people wouldn't know him if they walked past him on the street with their Mike Trout jersey on. People still would be like, I don't know who that is. That's crazy to me. But, again, that's a completely separate issue. Main point, steroids save baseball. You can believe what you want to believe, say it's wrong, all that other stuff. Completely agree. It saved baseball. I don't know where baseball would be without the steroid era. Everyone just needs to, if we can all agree on that, then anything else we can discuss. But if we can't agree on the fact that steroids save baseball, then we can't have discussion. That and Barry Bonds the GOAT. If we can't have those conversations on those two things, Ken Griffey Jr. may have been the most electrifying player of that era, but Barry Bonds the GOAT. I won't listen to you if you can't agree with that point. So those two things. Steroids save baseball. I'm not saying everyone should be taking performance-enhancing drugs, but made the sport more enjoyable. So there is that. And Barry Bonds is the GOAT. Just need to throw that in there. But yeah, so that's just my opinion on the doc. If you haven't seen it already, I would. I mean, it was pretty, for a person like me who hadn't lived through it, it's pretty interesting and pretty exciting just to see the excitement around that time period and around that race. Just because, I mean, it was just crazy. Just how much people were captivated by those two guys. Like, literally just two guys helped captivate an entire nation. So that's crazy. And also, so yeah, I would recommend it also. I mean, you see a lot of home runs. I like home runs, so I can live with it. But yeah, so after this next break, we're going to come back and discuss how the Rona, even though, again, people have differing opinions on how serious it is making its way to college campuses. And that's before colleges even open back up for school in the fall. Complete mess. But we'll talk about all of that right after the break. So, stay right there.
Are you looking to get your college football fix? Looking to get the latest news on your favorite school's team? The GSMC College Football Podcast is your ticket to all things college football. Join us as we talk college football from the national championship, the college rivalries, the bowl game, to the Heisman Trophy. To which conference is the best? We've got you covered for the Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, the Pac-12, ACC, and everything in between. Download the GSMC College Football Podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
During the segment, when I plan on talking about this, I was going to talk about Houston and how they had to shut down their voluntary workouts because like 6 guys were symptomatic with the Rona. But then Ohio State decided to have a bombshell be dropped, and me being a person that is in need of content, I appreciated it. So Ohio State football players and their parents were asked to sign an acknowledgement of risk waiver regarding the coronavirus pandemic before returning to campus for voluntary workouts on June 8th. Athletic Director Gene Smith confirmed to ESPN on Sunday. The Buckeye Pledge, obtained and reported by the Columbus Dispatch, asked players to help stop the spread of COVID-19 and accept I may be exposed to COVID-19 and other infections. By signing the 2-page electronic pledge, players agreed to testing and potential self-quarantining, monitoring for symptoms, reporting any potential exposure in a timely manner, and to practice center of CDC guidelines such as wearing masks and practicing social distancing. The waiver states any failure to comply with my Buckeye Pledge above may lead to immediate removal of athletic participation privileges, not my athletic scholarship, and such or the inability to use athletic facilities. Every football player has signed the waiver, according to school spokesman, who also said the university is not sharing cumulative testing information publicly. Smith said the waiver is intended, more for educational purposes than it is for liability. That's why we call it a pledge. We don't look at it as a legal document. It is a Buckeye Pledge, allows to help you so that if we face a situation, or our trainers, our strength coach, our coaches, our athletic administrator, sees a student athlete not wearing a mask and not social distancing, we can say, hey, you made a commitment, you signed a pledge, your parents signed a pledge, your parents are a part of this. So, again, it's not as bad as if you saw the president, allegedly, he's having his people that are going to attend his upcoming rally this next Saturday or this upcoming Saturday in Tulsa. Crazy, but whatever. They are going to have to sign they have to sign an actual waiver. This is, again, they call it a pledge, but it's a waiver just basically acknowledging, like, hey, if you get the Rona, don't blame us. Which is crazy because a lot of his supporters and even some of the people in his administration have kind of been trying to downplay the seriousness of the disease. But then when you're hosting people around in a big gathering in large quantities and most people won't be wearing masks, you're like, hey, if you catch it, don't blame us. Like, it can't be both. You can't be not taking it seriously, but then also making people sign waivers. That sounds crazy. The same thing with this. I get it's a pledge, all that stuff, but basically you're saying that if you catch it, like I said, the beginning says that you will help stop the spread and you may be exposed to it and other infections. So even if you're doing things right, or you're supposed to, like, you can be doing everything right, you still may be exposed to it. And I'm just like, if that's the case, then why are we up here? That's the crazy part about this waiver. Is one, this is for voluntary workouts. So, in theory, players should be allowed to be like, nah, I'm good. But it's college. So, of course, everyone's going to go. Because if you don't go, there's a chance your spot's not going to be there. Because someone else will be going that's behind you. They will take your spot, they'll get all this extra work, and then the coaches will be like, hey, look, you should have came to voluntary workouts. I mean, same thing happens in the NFL, but again, once you start making money and stuff, you were like, I could care less. Like, people go to the voluntary workouts over the, like, once you get to a certain level outside the quarterback, like if you're like a big time receiver, you're like a defensive end or like a corner or something, you're like, I don't need to be at the voluntary workouts, and no one really bats an eye. Now the mandatory stuff, cool, I completely understand. But we're talking about voluntary workouts they have to sign this pledge for. To be like, hey, look, you may be exposed to this. You're going to make sure you wear your mask, and if you don't, then blah, blah, this, such and such can happen to you. Like, if that's the case, we need to take all these precautions just to make sure everyone stays safe. Why are we up here? Explain that to me. And on top of the fact that all the players have to sign in, they did, because, again, they're college kids. They really can't afford not to, because their livelihood is tied to them being on the football field, potentially. And they won't be able to do that if they don't show up for these workouts. Again, they'll say they'll be fine, but it's like Justin Fields. Pretty much everybody else has to show up. And even Justin Fields he'll be fine, but like you could fear for your job a little bit because, Ohio State recruits good quarterback prospects, so it's not like there's not somebody behind you that could do what you did, to a lesser degree, but like you get the point. Like, I guess if Chase Young was still, like, he wouldn't have to go. Or, like, I guess if he didn't go, it wouldn't be, like, the biggest deal. But, like, everybody else, you kind of got to be out there. And that's why it's crazy that they're making people sign this pledge. You're basically acknowledging that there's a risk. Like, if you're up here, you're going to do everything you can to make sure you don't spread it. But you still might get it. And I go, you can try to sugarcoat it. You can try to reword it however you want to reword it. You're still making people sign a document saying that, like, you may be exposed to the coronavirus if you come up here for workouts. And again, this is for voluntary stuff. This is not like, if it's not like you're forced to come up here. You basically are forced. But you're not, like, technically forced to come up here, because that's what the word voluntary means. But still, it's just like, that's just crazy to be like, we need to make sure that we acknowledge that, look, if you're coming up here, you may get the Rona. Like this, I'm just letting you know. Just letting you know that if you come up here, it may happen. And I'm just like, and granted, I'm not a parent, but if I were a parent, I'd be like, how could I, in good conscience, send my kid up there knowing that that's a thing? Especially when you're seeing all these campuses that are opening up now. Outside Houston, they're the only ones that have to shut down. But for like the other campuses that you see, they're having 5, 10, how many ever cases, new cases all the time. Like, that's crazy to me when you think about it. That's crazy to me. Like, how could you be like, yeah, like, it is what it is. Like, it might happen. And then just be like, oh, yeah, but no, completely. It's safe to send your kids up here. No problem. Like, please, give us all your children. Like, what? That's crazy to think about. And again, like I said, you call it a pledge, so it's not a waiver. But all you need is for the wrong kid to contract it. Like somebody with asthma or some sort of pre-existing condition you didn't know about. Now he's in a dire situation. God forbid he passes away. what kind of lawsuit would the school, or any school, not just Ohio State, but any school have on their hands if that happens? And it's going to keep happening because, again, schools have basically said that, like, hey, look, we're going to put some guidelines in place, but we're going to have classes in the fall. Well, more schools are saying that, not every school, but schools are saying that, and I guess if you're in Georgia, they're like, hey, look, wear a mask, don't wear a mask, we could care less. And I'm just like, how can you in good faith send a student or send a child up there and think, yeah, no, they'll be perfectly fine? You can't. It's not possible. Because adults aren't going to be perfect. Like, people in general aren't going to be perfectly fine. So will most college kids, generally speaking, recover from it? Probably. But all it takes is one. The same thing with any sports coming back. All it takes is the wrong person to get it. Or even, like I said, not even just students. You can pass it on to a coach. You can pass it on to an administrator. You can pass it on to anybody on the campus that's up there. All it takes is the wrong person to pass away from this, and they have to shut everything down. So it's a complete mess, in my opinion. But this is what's going to happen. They're going to try to play college football this year, for better or for worse. And until they are forced to stop, this is the kind of things we were going to be seeing. People having to sign waivers or pledges, if you will, to make it show that they acknowledge the dangers of, like, what's going on. I mean, and who knows once, like, campuses open back up, what could potentially happen up there. I mean, there's no way you can control thousands and thousands of students all kind of reusing the same areas and going through the same buildings and going through the same elevators and going through the same dorms and dining halls and cafeterias and recreational places. Like, how do you police that? How? You can't. You literally can't unless you have people on the sidewalk doing a mask check. Like, how do you police that? But this is what's going to happen. So it's unfortunate, but it is what it is. So to get back to the Houston football having to shut down, because that was another mess of a story. Now, so this was from Friday. You mean Houston Athletics had to put out its own statement, so you know it's bad. But Houston, the University of Houston, that is, has suspended all voluntary workouts after 6 symptomatic student-athletes tested positive for COVID-19. The announcement came Friday afternoon, less than 2 weeks after the university allowed athletes to return to campus on June 1st. According to a release from the school, impacted students have been placed in isolation and contact tracing procedures have been initiated. The decision also came amid a second wave in Texas, as we've discussed, with Houston emerging as a COVID-19 hotspot since Memorial Day. But everybody wanted to be out for Memorial Day. And it clearly wasn't the best decision. And in hindsight, the NCAA allowed a moratorium on voluntary workouts to expire on May 31st, paving the way for athletes to return to campuses beginning June 1st. While multiple programs across the country have had athletes test positive for COVID-19, this marks the first time an FBS school has suspended workouts because of it. However, according to Joseph Durant of the Houston Chronicle, Houston only conducted tests on student athletes as they returned to campus if they showed symptoms. Stupid. No disrespect to Houston, but you need to test everybody regardless. That doesn't make any sense. The NCAA recommended a 6-week preseason calendar to start the 2020 season on time, beginning in mid-July. That's roughly 1 month away. While Houston is a new hotbed of COVID-19 cases, it wouldn't be surprising if other programs were forced to suspend activities as well if cases rise, especially in those hotbed states. They have the Arizonas, the Californias, the Texases, the Floridas of the world. While college football works towards a normal starting date, the latest hiccup is a reminder that the 2020 season will likely be anything but normal. And that's kind of where we're at. This season is going to be a weird one. And this is not going to be, like they mentioned, and I believe, this isn't going to be the last school that has to shut down voluntary workouts because people are testing positive for the Rona. It's not. You know it, I know it, we all know it. It's unfortunate, but that's where we are. Because, again, if you only are testing people that show symptoms when they return to campus, kids are returning to campus from all over the place. People are going to be returning to Ohio State, from Texas, from Florida, from Ohio, from New Jersey, from California, New York, all over the country. And and again, maybe they'll have better testing place than Houston did. But if you don't, then you risk spreading it. Now, like I said, not only do those 6 people have to be quarantined, now, if I was at those practices, I got to constantly be getting tested. just to be. I got to quarantine myself 14 days just to be safe. If it were me, again, it's not me. But if it were me, just because if 6 guys on your team had it and were not just had it, but were symptomatic, and you had to shut it down, who says someone else doesn't have it? It might be asymptomatic. You can't trust anybody. And like I said, not only are they shutting it down, now not everybody from there is from Houston. Now these players that may have been exposed to it are flying back to wherever they're going from. Now they're bringing it back to whatever states they were in or whatever cities they were in, potentially causing more outbreaks. It's a whole mess of stuff. And it's all because Texas and some of the other states wanted to be, hey, look, we're good. We got it under control. We're open up early. And then look at where we are. 2 weeks into their voluntary workouts, they already had to close stuff down. I mean, we talk about Oklahoma State had players test positive, Alabama, Iowa State. And they won't be the last. The virus, it hasn't gone anywhere, as I've been trying to tell people. They won't be the last schools that have people test positive or have people have to shut down their programs because of it. It's an unfortunate situation, but it's one that we're probably going to have to be dealing with for quite a while. But we shall see. Maybe Ohio State and other schools will learn from the Houston situation and understand that, like, look, we have to take this seriously. We can't take it lightly. But we'll see how that goes. After this next break, we're going to come back and I'm going to discuss my personal top 5 QB and head coach combos in the NFL today. And there's a pretty solid list of coaches and player and quarterbacks, I should say, out there in the league. But again, this is my top 5. So the number 1 should be obvious. Number 2 should be obvious too. But 3 through 5, that's where the debate kicks in. So we will discuss those right after the break. Stay right there.
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC, Invicta FC, Bellator, and one championship. We got the fights covered. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts. Past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
So when I talk about quarterback and head coach combos, obviously the level of success they've had together factors in. The level of success maybe they've had separately in case it's a new combination factors in. And also, again, this is mainly just for this next year. It's not over like 5 years, 10 years, or the best in terms of career quarterback head coach combos that we have in the game. It's just like, in terms of my confidence in them next year. Like, all right, if this guy was my head coach and this guy was my quarterback, who are the top 5? Like, who are the top 5 that I would be confident in heading into this next season, regardless of what else they have around them? Obviously, the teams that they're on do matter a wee bit, but that's not my main point. My main point is just basically head coach, quarterback. Who are the guys that I have confidence in? The most confidence in, obviously, heading into next season, 2020, assuming we have a season, because again, still up in the air. But number 5, this was an interesting one for me because there's quite a few answers that you could put here, depending on your level of opinion on these guys. Obviously, Dak and Mike McCarthy could be one, but I was worried because, again, we haven't seen them together. That matters a little bit to me. Though, obviously, we will have a new head coach and quarterback combo on this list because, obviously, you know who it is. But that's just because of the greatness of the one quarterback. Dak is not at that level yet. So you have him, you have those two, Goff was a little shaky last year. But Goff and McVay, that's another that would have been a popular one this time last year. Oh, Lord, I forgot about one. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm trying to work through this list as I'm going through it. But I just realized that I was going to omit someone, I should say, and I can't. I can't do that. So my number 5 is actually going to be different than who I thought it was. So then now I can add them in the honorable mention. Like Harbaugh and Lamar, they could have easily been. I mean, Lamar is a MVP, but he's not going to be on my top 5 just because. And maybe, I mean, again, everyone's going to have different top 5s, but like Lamar and Harbaugh, that could be one, but Harbaugh's a little bit different because he doesn't really coach the offense or the defense. I mean, Lamar doing winning MVP, but most of these other coaches help, and there's only one of the coaches that obviously doesn't have an input on one of the two. I mean, not that Harbaugh doesn't have input, but again, he's not, other than them going for it on 4th down, he's not calling the plays on offense, he's not calling the plays on defense. That wasn't what his job was as a coordinator, so it's not what his job is as a head coach. But he's one. I'm trying to think who else. Like Reich and Phillip Rivers, if Phillip Rivers gets his stuff back together. I mean, Derek Carr and Gruden, that would have been one down on the list. O'Brien and Deshaun. I mean, Bill O'Brien's made some very questionable decisions as a personnel guy, but him and Deshaun have worked pretty well together. Outside of his sometimes in-game decision making, that's definitely leaves some to be desired. Who else? I mean, Belichick's not going to be on the list because no Tom Brady. Don't know what Jarrett Stidham's going to look like. Can't do that. But enough honorable mentions. Get into my list. So this is probably going to be a little controversial, but I'm going to put Sean Payton and Drew Brees at 5. Only because they've been together for a long time and only have one Super Bowl to show for it. Put up great numbers. Their team is as good as it's been in Drew Brees and Sean Payton in that era. Drew was great last year minus the injury. He should come back good. They got better weapons around him. Obviously, they have someone to pair with Michael Thomas this year finally. But for whatever reason, they haven't had the level of success in the playoffs that you would hope for. I mean, the last 3 years, they've been eliminated by Kirk Cousins, Jared Goff, and Case Keenum. Who, I mean, that's not exactly a murderer's row of quarterbacks, depending on who you ask. But, again, it's just, for whatever reason, they haven't been able to put it all together when the time comes. And I don't know whose fault that is, or if that is anybody's fault, but because of that, they got to drop down a little bit lower for me just because I've seen some of these other guys have more success, continued level of success. I mean, they've been to one Super Bowl, and they've been together for at least over 10 years. Been to one Super Bowl. Again, not all their fault. Some of it had to do with the defense. But, I mean, Sean Payton's the head coach, so there's that. But, end of the year, again, Sean Payton's a good coach. Drew Brees is a great quarterback. I mean, I guess argue great coach. But that's why they're in my top 5. But, like I said, they're definitely going to be a little bit controversial for me. So, 4 is a little interesting. Okay, hold on. So, take that back. Sean Payton and Drew Brees are going to move up to 4. I'm gonna go back to 5 because I had this. No. Yeah, no, I'm gonna do it. I think Doug's a better head coach than Sean Payton. So I'm gonna move them up to 4, move 4 up to 3, and I'm gonna put Brady and Arians at 5. Only because we haven't seen them together, and Brady's old. He didn't look that great last year. So I said that's again. I'm a little bit backwards on this. The 3-2-1 roll, like that all makes sense. But 5, change that. Brady and Arians will be at 5. Only because, like, again, Tom Brady's the GOAT quarterback. Can't argue that. I mean, Bruce Arians got 5,000 yards and 30 touchdowns out of Jameis. Granted, he threw 30 interceptions, but he got 5,000 passing yards and 30 touchdowns out of Jameis. I mean, Jameis to say he's one of the best quarterbacks ever, or something along those lines this week. It's crazy. But, I mean, that's the kind of confidence Bruce Arians instills in his players. It seems like, and again, they were on the cusp. Had James been a little less turnover prone, they might have even snuck into the playoffs potentially. And they maybe will if Brady is not turning the ball over, and that's not what he does, so I wouldn't expect that this year. But yeah, so assuming he can get something similar out of Brady that he got out of Jameis, that's definitely going to be a top candidate. And again, he's had success, but he's never really won anything as a head coach himself, obviously. And Brady's never won anything without Belichick, so you got to see it first. So they would be a little bit higher. I mean, if this were Brady and Belichick, they'd probably be 2. But because it's not, and it's Bruce Arians, and he's a different kind of guy, and plus Brady's a little bit older now, I can't put them that high. So they're at 5. Breeze and Peyton are at 4, even though Breeze is a better quarterback than the next guy, at least right now. Coming after the end of next year, we may be singing a different tune. But I think this next head coach is a better head coach than Sean Payton is. And that next head coach would be Doug Peterson. So I'm going to put Doug and Wentz at 3. Call me biased if you want. It is what it is. I'm going to say that only because Doug, over the last 3 years, has shown that he can get it done no matter the circumstances. And then, I mean, not get it done is obviously win a Super Bowl or everything. But 2017, I deal with injuries at left tackle, deal with injuries at corner throughout the year, deal with injuries at quarterback, obviously, famously. And didn't miss a beat. Went on to win the Super Bowl. I mean, granted, they were the best team all year before Wentz got hurt. It's not shocking they won the Super Bowl, but again, you lose your starting quarterback, not expected to do that. Next year, come back, deal with injuries again. Quarterback goes down again. Get to the playoffs, win a playoff game. This year, that was 2 years ago. This past season, deal with injuries, every position. Offensive line. Only position running back. Only position they really didn't have injuries was that quarterback. I mean, Zach Ertz missed game. Receivers, I mean, everybody, their top 3 receivers all missed time. They were throwing to guys that no one had heard of. If you didn't follow the Eagles before the last 4 games, dealt with injuries. I guess defensive line was because then Malik Jackson missed the entire season. Linebacker, I mean, the linebackers weren't that good to begin with, but there was a little bit of injuries there. And then secondary, outside of safety, corners, mess. People in and out the lineup. And still made the playoffs. Now, you could argue playing the NFC East the last 4 games of the season definitely helped, and I would agree. But Doug has shown me that when the going gets tough, he can get his team to hunker down and buy in and make that push late in the season. 3 years in a row, they've had injuries late in the season that they've had to deal with. And 3 years in a row, they've found a way to make the playoffs. And again, obviously, the 1 year they went to the Super Bowl, and they could have honestly went back if Alshon catches the pass against the Saints, and instead of letting it go through his hands, and he goes to 3rd down as opposed to an interception. I think they were marching down the field. They could have happened. You know what I'm saying? That's just, I have that much faith in Doug, and then obviously have better weapons on the outside receiver this year, and then also Carson, if he's healthy, which is not that big of an if because he's been healthy for a full season twice. I don't count the concussion because that was 1 game. He would have been fine the next game. But if he's healthy, we've seen that he's one of the at least top 5, if not top 3, top 2 quarterbacks in the league. Because even the year that Tom Brady won that MVP, that was terrible. He should have won it. I don't understand how they gave it to Tom Brady. Just because, again, if he misses 3 games at the beginning instead of 3 games at the end, they give it to him for the same numbers because he had better numbers. Was second in the league in touchdown passes and missed 3 games. Was the quarterback of the best team in the NFC. Even before the game he got hurt, he threw a touchdown on a torn ACL, including 3 other touchdowns, and plus 3 other touchdown passes to help give his team the win for the division lead and clinch a playoff berth. So I don't want to hear that. So that's my number 3. Then 2 and 1 should be obvious, in my opinion. 2, Russell Wilson and Pete Carroll. Russell Wilson, in my opinion, is the 2nd best quarterback in the league. And with that, I mean, Pete Carroll's been a good head coach. Granted, have they been back to Super Bowl since 2014 when Pete Carroll threw it away by not handing the ball to Marshawn Lynch? No. But with Russell Wilson there, you are capable of always being in contention, even with a good division. And also, we know Pete Carroll can handle it. He's won at the college level. He's won at the pro level. We know, again, he's another guy when the going gets tough, he can get his team to buy in, no matter the circumstances, no matter who they have out there playing. He can get his team to buy in, and especially when you have Russ. As long as you have Russ, you can do almost anything, in my opinion. So that makes life a lot easier for him and the whole team. And then number 1, obviously Reed and Mahomes. They just won the Super Bowl. Mahomes is the best quarterback in the league. I don't know because Belichick's in the league, so Andy Reid isn't the best coach, but he's arguably the best offensive coach in my opinion. been a great offensive coach for forever. Just hadn't obviously won the big one yet, but then he was able to do it last year with Mahomes, and they'll be right back. Their offense shouldn't be any worse this year than it was last year. Mahomes will only be better. Hopefully he doesn't miss any games. Hopefully Tyreek Hill doesn't miss any games. They have Clyde Edwards-Helaire in the backfield now. Like, if there's a quarterback I trust in the league, it's Mahomes. And coupled with that, now that Andy Reid's won the big one and he's gotten that proverbial monkey off his back, it should be smooth sailing for him. He didn't even screw up time management stuff in the Super Bowl. That's how on top of his game he was. Maybe, like I said, maybe Mahomes helped break that curse. But I mean, right now I don't know how you have anyone else at one other than those two. So, one, like I said, Reid and Mahomes. 2, Carroll and Russell Wilson. No, that's debatable. 3, Doug and Wentz. Again, debatable. 4, Peyton and Breeze. And 5, Arians and Tom Brady. So, everyone after 1, I'm willing to debate for the other 4. I think those are probably the top 5. Again, Kyle Shanahan could be in here because he's arguably the best schemer in the league right now, but I don't have as much faith in Jimmy G. Like I said, then you got Lamar and Harbaugh. You got Goff and McVay, if you still believe in Jared Goff. Like, there's a couple other people that you could throw in there, but if this is my 5, you're more than welcome to tell me your 5. I am all ears. But with that being said, that'll do it from me here today on the GSMC Sports Podcast presented by GSMC Podcast Network. I want to thank you for listening. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the podcast. Make sure you never miss an episode. Make sure you're always on top when we drop our latest stuff. Also, if you could please as well, give us a 5-star rating, write us a nice review. Very appreciated, very helpful. Allows us to choose like, choose dislike, ways we can improve, all that fun stuff. And also, if you're on social media, we're on social media. So you can find us there, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. We can talk, we can chat, we can debate, we can discuss. Remember, the Rona is still out there. Wear a mask. Wear gloves. If you're not wearing gloves, bring hand sanitizer or something so you can make sure your hands are clean. Don't touch your phone too much. Don't touch your face. All that stuff. Like, again, try to be healthy because it's still out there. Even if people don't want to believe it, it still is. So you, like I said, you don't want to catch it. You don't want to pass it on to someone that may be more at risk than yourself. And as I do every episode, shout out to the essential workers out there that have been working throughout this pandemic. Like I said, doctors, nurses, delivery store people, grocery store workers. I think I said delivery store people. Delivery drivers, grocery store people, anyone else has been deemed essential. Got to work through this. Shout out to all those restaurant owners that have had to make a way, small businesses that have had to make a way during this time. All those bartenders, waiters, waitresses that are coming back now as states begin to open up. Make sure you tip them as well as you can because they've been, obviously everyone's been dealing with a lot. I'm not going to just say it was them. A lot of people are out of work or were out of work, but they're a job that survives mainly on tips. So if they do a good job, be willing to tip them a little bit extra. That's all I'm saying. And also, if you're going to be out there protesting, because I know there was a situation that happened with the police in Atlanta. No, what was Rashard Brooks, I believe was the guy's name. And again, he's not the only one. Yeah, Rashard Brooks, he was down in Atlanta. There was also some people that were hung in California that were reported suicide. I think one of the guys' names was Robert Foster. There was another girl in Tallahassee who had been missing. This came out tonight. There was a girl in Tallahassee that was missing. Had apparently been a very vocal activist for the movement and stuff, but also had been outing someone that had been abusing her. Don't know how to pronounce her name, but I think it was abbreviated Twan. I'm pretty sure was the name. I'm trying to find it. 19-year-old Toyin. Excuse me. I don't know how to pronounce her last name, but you can look it up. It's, like I said, all of it's a mess. So if you're going to be out there protesting, rioting, whatever, just make sure you wear a mask. That's all I ask. Be out there, always supporting by protesting. I understand that people are going to get on you if the numbers spike, but people out there protesting their right to get a haircut, no mask, screaming in police officers' faces. So I'm not trying to hear it. But all these people that have been involved and all these names that have come out and all these names that will continue to come out and haven't been mentioned and will continue to be mentioned, make sure, like I said, this is the issue with police brutality and systematic oppression, racism, and all sort of stuff that we will continue to be fighting. And I know it's hard to remember every name because that's almost impossible, but just try to make sure that these names don't get lost in the sauce. But that'll do it for me. That has been my time. And until next time, I've been Chris Blades, and peace out.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. From movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.